We are now at the end of the Thanksgiving weekend with all of its festivities, although they say this end of the weekend's the busiest travel day, so for some people I think it will be a very long end to the weekend. But with all of the excitement and preparations and festivities, it's kind of like a trial run for what we're facing in this upcoming month of December, with so many of its festivities and special celebrations as we look forward to Christmas and all the other holiday celebrations that so much mark this time of the year. All that requires a lot of preparation, all that involves: the shopping, the cooking, the decorating, gift wrapping, sending and receiving Christmas cards, and so forth. It is also the spiritual significance of this time of the year. What we mark spiritually during Advent corresponds well to what we are experiencing in our everyday life. We are preparing for the Lord's coming. We prepare for Christmas, his first coming in the lowliness of his human incarnation, his birth in Bethlehem. But Advent is also a time of preparing for his second coming, his glorious coming at the end of ages. And especially in this early beginning part of the season of Advent, this is more the focus that our church gives us to contemplate. It is so what the gospel reading is about today. This season of Advent is really a lesson for what the whole Christian life is, because we live in between the two comings. Christians, we live in this in-between time, between his first coming 2,000 plus years ago in Bethlehem, and when he took on our human flesh, and when he will come at the end of the ages. The question is, how are we to make use of this time that our Lord gives us before he returns? We who already know him because we know him through his first coming. The answer is clear from the readings for today's Mass of this first Sunday of Advent. Wake up. That message is very clear. It's exactly what St. Paul says in his letter to the Romans. It is the hour now for you to awake from sleep. What he's talking about is being spiritually and morally awake, living a pure, holy, virtuous life, as he says, to throw off the works of darkness and put on the armor of light, to live in the light. He lists examples of the works of darkness. It's a list of some very horrendous vices and debased, sinful practices, things that seem to abound in our own time. Such things people do in hiding because they don't want others to know about it. They are shameful things. Some want to take pride in them, but they are actually shameful and are usually done in secret in order to avoid being detected of what one is doing. So those who live that way are trying to live in secret, in the darkness. They don't want the truth to be revealed. And living that way will always lead to disaster. For Christians, those of us who have come to believe, as St. Paul puts it, we are to conduct ourselves, as he says, properly as in the day. That is, those who live a life of virtue, who live with integrity, what they profess to believe, have nothing to hide. They're not afraid of the light. They live in a way that is honest and truthful. He says to live properly. This word properly has the sense of respectfully, becomingly, someone who's presentable. This is the way to peace and good order. And this is being prepared to meet the Lord when he comes. We also see the same message from our Lord in the gospel reading. Again, he tells his listeners to stay awake. He says that those at the time of Noah were not awake. He describes them eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. So we can get this image that they're just totally oblivious. We'll be doing a lot of eating and drinking at the festivities during December, but we should not be oblivious to what he's talking about here. A devastating flood was about to hit their land, and they were just blind to it. And they continued on their merry way. So they were living in darkness with this spiritual blindness. They couldn't see what was happening around them. Only Noah and his family lived in the light, and they had the vision to see what was coming, and so they were saved from the flood by staying in the ark. The ark. The ark is an ancient symbol of the church, and the flood a symbol of the ravages of this world, the works of darkness that St. Paul indicates to his fellow Christians in Rome. The lesson is that the only way that we can say safe from these ravages of the world is in the church. Our church is our protection from the wiles of the evil one, the enticements of the world that are so alluring, but only pull us down to misery and always brings about disaster. We also must be careful, though, not to allow the world to enter the church. Even some people in the church can be led astray and can cause harm to others. For those who have experienced such harm, it's important to remember that our Lord, nonetheless, through it all, continues to protect and guide his church. The church is greater than the sum of her parts, because we are members united in and under our head, who is Jesus Christ. So he guides the church so that we may know the way of truth, we may receive his forgiveness and assistance with the grace of the sacraments. United to Christ, we cannot go wrong. And he will always be with his church, no matter how sinful or errant her members may be. Advent, then, is the time for us to renew, to get serious about this and return back into the ark, so that we might be safe from the ravages of the world and wiles of the evil one, or perhaps to get more serious about it. Only in the communion of the church can we truly live properly as in the day, modestly, respectfully, with purity, decency, and honesty. We need the strength that comes from the communion and the grace that Christ gives us to do so. And this is how we prepare to meet the Lord. It is how we get to know him better in this life, living this way, so that we can be ready to recognize him and welcome him when he comes. What does that really mean? There are ways the Lord seeks to come to us while we're in this in-between time during our lives in this world. Mother Teresa used to love to speak about the disguises he would use in the poor, the hungry, the needy, maybe even our neighbor or coworker who's in a dark moment in their own lives. This is the spiritual vision we need, to live in the light and notice what is happening around us. When we do that and give of ourselves generously, altruistically, for the good of the other, without regard for ourselves, the Lord comes to meet us. We begin to recognize him and get to know him better. And that way, we will be able to recognize him and welcome him when we meet him face to face at the end of this earthly pilgrimage. We need to make good use of the time our Lord gives us here, the time of our testing. This is a time of testing, and we will all face the final exam. So think about a school student having to face a final exam. If the student goes to the final exam without having studied, what's going to happen? Again, disaster. But the student who studies diligently all throughout the semester can face the final exam with confidence, even with a bit of trepidation, still with some confidence, and will do well. We need to study, but our Lord gives us the help to do so if we stay with him and stay with his church. There are many preparations at this time of the year so that we may enjoy fun and social time with family, with friends, and with co-workers. But let us not forget that our real preparation, our study, that is the semester of our life in this world, is prayer, penance, study. We might know the faith and know our Lord, and a life of charity, putting that all into the action by a life of good works. May we make good use of the time our Lord gives us in this world in this way, so that we may know him and so come to recognize and welcome him when he comes to meet us.